Hi guys, I'm the Automatinator, and today I'd like to talk to you about copying and pasting code in UiPath. And just to be clear what we're talking about here, what I'm referring to is how UiPath developers can copy and paste chunks of code within their projects in UiPath Studio. And I'm not referring to how you can program robots to copy and paste into different applications using activities in UiPath Studio. So if you are here for that second topic, do take a quick peek down in the description below. I would like to cover that second topic sooner rather than later in a video, and I'll be sure to include a link to that as soon as I've come out with that video. So what are we going to cover specifically about copying and pasting in UiPath today? Well, first of all, I'd like to get into the very basics and what copying and pasting looks like in general in UiPath Studio. Secondly, we'll start to dig into some of the nuances of copying and pasting, in particular, some of the things to know when you're copying and pasting between flowcharts and sequences. And thirdly, and I think this one is pretty cool, we'll talk about how copying and pasting can be used as kind of a quick and dirty method to share code between developers. If you're interested particularly in one of these topics, do look down below in the description, and I'll include links to the particular timestamps in the video when you can see me talking about that particular topic. If, after watching through this video, you have enjoyed it and have got something out of the experience, please do like and subscribe. This will help me continue creating content like this in the future. Without further ado, let's dive into it. So before I discuss how you can use copying and pasting to share code between developers, I just wanted to quickly discuss the very basics of copying and pasting in UiPath, and to do that I've pulled up two UiPath projects. So on the left you can see I have a project with a flowchart that I filled in with several sequences and a decision stage, and on the right I have a completely blank project with absolutely nothing in it. So the very basics of copying and pasting in UiPath, what that's going to look like is I'm going to select something from over here on the left, and I could select just one activity if I wanted to. I could select a series of activities, or I could do what I'm going to do here now, and I could actually select the main workflow that I have. So in this case, this flowchart, and I'm just going to right-click on it and click Copy. I could also use Control-C to do the same thing. Now I'm going to right-click over here in my right-hand project, and I'll go ahead and click Paste. I could also use Control-V, and there you have it. That's the basics of copying and pasting. You can see that it took everything within the workflow I had over here on the left, so everything in my flowchart, even down to the variables I had in my flowchart, and it pasted that over here onto the right. So I have those same variables. I even have the same layout that I had over here on the left. So I had my decision stage and it branched out in a certain way. Over here on the right, you can see it maintained that exact same layout. So that's the very basics of copying and pasting in UiPath. One other thing to note is that you don't just have to copy and paste between projects. You can copy and paste within the same project. So let's say that for some reason I want to duplicate these steps 1.1, 1.2, and 1.3. I can just copy those, paste them somewhere else in my project, and they paste just as we kind of anticipate that they should. So if I begin to talk about pasting between flowcharts and sequences, though, things start to get a little bit weird. There's some nuances there, so let me show that real quick. Let's say that these steps 1.1, 1.2, and 1.3, it's reasonable to assume that those are all steps of step 1, and that I would rather have them inside of step 1 rather than out here in the flowchart. So let's say I go ahead and cut these, which is also something you can do. I'll open up my step 1, and I'm going to go ahead and paste them in here. You can see right off the bat what it did. It actually reversed the order, or the order I would have anticipated, of these three sequences. So I had 1.1 followed by 1.2 followed by 1.3 going top to bottom out in my flowchart. Here in my sequence, it reversed the order. I now have 1.3 going to 1.2 going to 1.1. So if I wanted to switch that up, I would actually need to, move my 1.2 below my 1.1 and my 1.3 below my 1.2, and then I have the same order that I had out in the flowchart. Going back the other direction, we'll see something similar. So if I were to copy these three sequences from inside step 1, go back out to my flowchart and paste them here, you'll see once again it reversed the order. I have 1.3, 1.2, 1.1 going from top to bottom instead of 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, which I would have anticipated. So this is just something to be aware of when you're copying and pasting between flowcharts and sequences, is that you're probably going to have to do some rearranging of those copy and pasted activities. Something else to be aware of, and you might have noticed this just a minute ago, is that if I'm copying from within a sequence and pasting in a flowchart. So there I just use Control C. I'm going to use Control V here. It will always paste the activity that you copied from a sequence to the very top left of a flowchart. So if you have a very large flowchart and you're looking for where it pasted that, it's always going to be up in the top left if you use Control V. But if you were to copy an activity from the flowchart itself, so let's say I copy this step 2 down here and paste that just using Control V, you'll notice it copies it on top of that activity. So it's something to be aware of. If you have really big flowcharts, sometimes you're copying and pasting and you might lose track of where something is. It's either going to be right over top of the activity you just copied, or it's going to be in the top left-hand corner if you're taking something from a sequence and pasting it out in a flowchart. The reverse is also true. So let's say I want to take these 3 sequences, copy them, and take them back up to my flowchart. If I paste them here, we'll immediately see that the order of those 3 activities has gone back and it's reversed itself once again. So now I have, going from top to bottom, 1.3, 1.2, and 1.1, even though I had the correct order within step 1. And this is just something you have to be aware of. When you're copying and pasting between flowcharts and sequences, you're most likely going to have to do some reordering of those copied and pasted activities. Something else, and you might have noticed this from this example that I performed just now, but if I were to copy an activity from within a sequence, so I'm going to just use Control C to copy this step 1, going to come back out to my flowchart, and I'll go ahead and paste that here. You'll notice the location that it's going to paste that activity is going to be in the top left of your flowchart. This is different from, say, if I were to copy this step 2 down here, I'll just use Control C, and if I do Control V right now to paste that step 2, since it's coming from a flowchart and going to a flowchart, it will paste that in the same location in the second flowchart, or if you're pasting it to the same flowchart, the same location in that flowchart that that activity or that sequence was in the original flowchart. So if I paste step 2 over here, you'll see it pasted it in that same location. It did not paste it up in the top left corner like it would have if I were copying something from a sequence. So that's just something to be aware of, especially if you have really big flowcharts. Sometimes it's really easy to lose track of where something is copying and pasting to, and that will really depend on whether you're copying or pasting from a sequence or a flowchart. Now within sequences, you have a little bit more control about exactly where you copy or paste something to. So let's say that I copy this step 1.1. I now have that on my clipboard and I have some control over exactly where I want that pasted. For instance, if I want that to be pasted within step 1.2 here, I can right-click within my step 1.2, click paste, and that's exactly where that step 1.1 will go. Or if I want it between steps 1.1 and 1.2, I just need to right-click there, click paste, and lo and behold, there it is right between those 2 steps, exactly where I wanted it. If I do something like right-click on the bar at the top of the sequence that I'm in and paste it there, be aware that it will go to the very bottom of that sequence. So I'm not sure if you'll be able to see with my picture there, but that last step 1.1 went to the very bottom of my step 1 sequence. But those are your options. You have a lot more control when you're in a sequence, determining exactly where you want to paste something just by right-clicking on the exact location you want to paste it to. So that's the basics of copying and pasting in UiPath, but earlier I mentioned that we can use copying and pasting as kind of a quick and easy method of sharing code between developers. Let me demonstrate what I mean by that. So I'm going to delete my flowchart out of this project that I have on the right, and I'm going to show a second method whereby we could copy the code that we have on the left and end up pasting it using copy and paste to get it over to my project on the right. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to start off exactly the same way. I'll copy my flowchart from over here on the left, and now I'm going to open an intermediary program. In this case, for my example, I've chosen Notepad, but a more realistic example might be that you paste this into an Outlook email or into a IM through Skype or Teams. And you can see that when I paste my flowchart into Notepad, it converts that into code, so into a giant block of code. It didn't try to paste a screenshot or anything like that of my flowchart. Rather, it converted it into code, and that's what ended up being pasted into Notepad. And the cool thing that I now have the option of doing is I can actually select this block of code in Notepad. I'm now going to copy that code, and if I paste it over here into my second project, we can see that the second project interpreted that big block of code as the flowchart that I originally copied from my project one. You can see it has the same design, has the same variables. Everything is exactly the same as if I had copied and pasted directly from my project one to my project two. So this is a neat little trick, but how exactly does this help us? Well, where I found this to be particularly useful and why I think this is such a cool feature for UiPath to have is in situations where you have two different developers, and let's say that we have one developer who's asking the other developer for a piece of code. So let's say that developer B is in project 2 over here. They're on their own machine and they're requesting some code, some reusable component, maybe a login sequence or something from developer A over here on the left. And they're saying, I know you did something like this in the past. Could you please send that to me? Well, if developer A has their project open, they can just open it up, select whatever sequences developer B is asking for, paste those into the body of an email, paste those into a Skype message, send them directly over to developer B. Developer B can then take that code and paste it into their project, and boom, they're done. This is as opposed to the alternative, which is basically developer A saving their project, saving it as a XAML, wrapping that XAML up, maybe attaching it to an email and sending it to developer B, or maybe putting it on a network drive location somewhere. And that's just a little bit inefficient, especially if I've worked for organizations before where you actually can't send XAML files as attachments in emails. Those get blocked out by some Outlook security feature, and it can make it really difficult to share code between developers. But when you have this copy and paste option, you can just copy the code, paste it into the body of the email, send it directly to developer B. The security system, in my experience, haven't bothered with the fact that there's code in the body of the email. And developer B can then take that code, paste it into their project, and they're good to go from there. One quick caveat I will mention to this copying and pasting method through an intermediary is that for whatever reason, although UiPath gives you the ability to copy and paste arguments or variables, which, by the way, if you did not know that you could copy and paste variables and arguments, this is just kind of an extra tidbit for this video for you. One option that you have is you can do something like I copied this in argument 1 that I had over here in my left-hand project. I can right-click over here in my right-hand project, paste that, and you can see it copied and pasted just as I kind of would have anticipated. You can even do this with several arguments or variables at a time. If I copy those 2 arguments, paste them over here, pasted both at once. So that's a pretty cool feature. Unfortunately, for whatever reason, I'm going to create a 4th argument here. What you cannot do is I cannot copy that argument, paste it into some intermediary program, copy the block of code it creates. You'll see it did actually create a block of code for that argument 4. But if I then go over to my second project here and attempt to paste that, it doesn't even give me the option to paste. I'm not exactly sure why this is, but for whatever reason, although you can copy and paste sequences, flowcharts, activities, whatever you want between the bodies of your projects, this way you cannot, via an intermediary program, copy and paste variables or arguments like that. So just something to be aware of. Otherwise, I think this is a really cool option that you have for sharing code between developers, and I hope you guys found it interesting as well. This is the Automatinator. Thanks for watching my video.